Hello, good morning everyone, Rich Wong here. Welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to have a look at the new wireless video transmitter from Hollyland. It is the Hollyland Mars 4K. A usual disclaimer before we start. The sample unit that I use in this review was sent to me by Hollyland, but as usual I will share with you my thoughts including both the pros and cons I found about this wireless video transmitter and all my test results in this video as well. The Mars 4K is Hollyland's latest video transmitter in their Mars series. We have previously reviewed the 300 Pro, 400S Pro on this channel, and after their Cosmo C1, it's finally time for them to add another new product to their very popular Mars lineup. The price of the Mars 4K transmitter and receiver pack is US $699, so it is the most expensive product in the Mars series and $100 more expensive than the Mars 400S Pro. The Mars 4K has a tall portrait-shaped design with a screen on the side, so it is quite similar to the Mars 300 Pro or the Cosmo C1, but it is quite different to the Mars 400S Pro. The transmitter and the receiver has almost identical design, but the transmitter has the red 4K badge on it, while the receiver has the blue 4K badge on it. Very solid construction with full metal casing and typical Hollyland style design. The Mars 4K has a new style antenna which I haven't seen before on any other Hollyland products. It's much shorter and it is fixed, so you can look at the transmitter. We have a few input ports on the side here, one full-size HDMI and a SDI input, and then we have a DC power input at the bottom. On the receiver, we have one HDMI output and one SDI output, and also we have the DC power port as well. There's one DC power supply that comes with the box. I would really like to see two power supplies included, but since both the transmitter and the receiver can also be powered by the Sony NPF style battery or USB-C power supply, so only having one DC power supply included is probably not a problem for most users. On the other side of the unit, we have a screen here at the top, a rocker style button and a power switch, and then a USB-C port. At first, I thought the screen is the same screen as the one on the Mars 300 Pro, but turns out it is a completely different screen. Quite a bit bigger, higher resolution, and also it is a color screen. But I actually didn't know it is a color screen at first because the default screen is just a single color black and white. But once you press the button and then you go into the setup menu, then I noticed it is a new color screen. If you compare it with the Mars 400S Pro, the screen on the Mars 4K is still quite a bit smaller, but it is quite high resolution, so it can display all the important information and it is quite easy to read even on a bright sunny day. The only thing I found it a bit weird is that, or maybe I should say funny, is that when you power up the unit, it will display the company's logo and the name, but the name Hollyland got chopped off, so it doesn't display the D at the end. So of course it doesn't really matter, but I just found it a little bit funny. The rocker style button below the screen is a button as well as an up-down control for the device. At first, I thought I can also do left and right control because I can push left and right and there's a click, but it seems left and right actually doesn't do anything at all. The power switch below is also quite a bit bigger than the one on the Mars 300 Pro or the Cosmo C1, so it's quite a bit easier to use. The Mars 4K doesn't have an integrated cold shoe mount, and instead it comes with a separate cold shoe mount that you can screw onto the bottom of the unit, or you can attach it onto this side using another attachment accessory so that you can place the transmitter in a horizontal way. Using the Mars 4K is really straightforward. Just connect the power source to both the transmitter and receiver, and then either attach a HDMI or SDI cable and power on both units, and that's all you need to do. The transmitter and the receiver should pair with each other automatically. The time it takes to have the transmitter and receiver paired and start transmitting video is about 35 seconds or so after you turn on both units. I myself would like to see the time decrease a little bit, but at the same time, I don't think most users would really mind. The Mars 4K has smart channel scan feature, so it will just automatically help you choose the channel that is most suitable. But you can also manually choose any of the available channel, and when you change the channel from the transmitter, the receiver would automatically adjust and match it within a few seconds. Hollyland claims the maximum transmission range of the Mars 4K is 450 feet or 150 meter. LOS. This is slightly longer than the range for the Mars 400S Pro, which is 400 feet or 120 meter. To test if this claimed maximum transmission range is true or not, I brought the Mars 4K to a park that has a large open outdoor space. I set up the camera with the transmitter on a tripod at one end of the park, and I have the receiver connect to my Atomos Ninja 5 and use that to record the received footage as I walk away from the camera. So I hold the receiver slightly away from my body to make sure there is a direct line of sight between the transmitter and the receiver. But when I was reviewing my footage, I noticed my body was still blocking between the transmitter and the receiver a little bit from time to time. But it doesn't really seem to matter, because when I walk 200 meters away from the transmitter, pretty much as far as I can walk there that still has a direct line of sight, I still can receive the video signal with no issue at all. So it's more than match the claimed transmission range code by the factory. But remember, this is a LOS range test, which means there is a direct line of sight with no interference. So if you are using it indoor at places that has walls and large objects in between, the maximum transmission range could be much shorter. The Mars 4K is compatible with the Hollyview Smart Device app as well as the new Mars M1 monitor. If you haven't heard of the Hollyview app before, it is a very nice app that can be used both as a monitor with extra visual assist tools such as histogram, peaking, as well as for recording. And there are many other features as well. The app is also compatible with all the other latest Mars series transmitters. So one Mars 4K transmitter can be connected to two hardware receivers at the same time. The hardware receiver can be either the Mars 4K receiver or the Mars M1 monitor. Or you can swap out a hardware receiver and replace it with up to two smart devices running the Hollyview app at the same time. So it means a Mars 4K transmitter can be connected to one hardware receiver and up to two smart devices at the same time, or no hardware receiver and up to 4 smart devices at the same time. If you are planning to buy the Mars M1 monitor, the Mars 4K receiver can also be used to receive the signal transmitted from the Mars M1 monitor as well. Latency is very minimal with both the hardware receiver and the app. I thought the smartphone app would have much higher latency, but turns out I found the latency with the app is actually slightly lower than using the hardware receiver, which is a bit surprising. Anyway, we'll have a closer look at the latency next. Latency is another very important thing for a wireless video transmitter, especially if the camera operator relies on the received footage to adjust the camera in real time. Hollyland said the Mars 4K has an ultra low latency of 0.06 seconds or 60 milliseconds, so it is very low latency. And I did some tests to see if this claim figure is accurate or not in real life. One thing we need to know is pretty much any electronic device would have some kind of latency. So for me to see how much latency is introduced by the Hollyland Mars 4K, first I directly connect my monitor to my computer, my MacBook Pro, and I measure the latency by comparing the footage from the built-in monitor and the mirrored output to the external monitor. So with this direct HDMI cable connection, there is around 24 millisecond latency. That is pretty minimal. So that's the base latency figure that I have. Then I replaced the direct HDMI cable connection with the MAS 4K transmitter. The transmitter was sending video signal in 1080p 60 mode, and that's just what my MacBook Pro output by default. With this configuration, the latency was about 95 milliseconds after I minus the base latency number, so that's just under 0.1 second. It's not bad, but it's not exactly the same as the claimed 60 millisecond latency. But the MAS 4K has 3 different operating modes that we can choose, and this test was done when it was using the default balance mode, which I believe is not the fastest mode. So I switched to the speed mode and redo the test again, and this time I got the latency value 63 milliseconds. So the speed mode definitely reduced the latency quite a bit, and it is pretty much the same as Hollyland's claimed 60 millisecond figure. There is one more mode, which is the HD mode. I assume that means better image quality but maybe a little bit more latency. So I did another round of tests again in HD mode, and interestingly the latency figure I got in this mode is 93.5 milliseconds, so virtually the same as when the MAS 4K was running in balance mode. So that's a little bit interesting, as I was really expecting the latency would be a little bit higher. In return, it gives us better image quality. So let's do some image quality tests next and see if there is any difference in terms of image quality when the MAS 4K is running in different mode. The MAS 4K supports a range of different video resolution from 720p up to 4K. The frame rate can be up to 60 frames per second when transmitting in 1080p or 720p, and it also supports the decimal point frame rate like 23.98, 29.97. When transmitting in 4K, it can go up to 30 frames per second. This is the first video transmitter from Hollyland that can handle 4K, so no wonder Hollyland just named the transmitter MAS 4K. One thing I want to mention is that 4K transmission is only for the HDMI connection. If you use SDI input, the maximum resolution is still 1080p, and when you use a 4K HDMI input but using SDI output, it is also limited to 1080p. So this is something that you have to aware if you are mainly rely on SDI input or output. Anyway, I want to see if the 4K transmission really improved the image quality or not, so I did some comparison tests with the 1080p MAS 400S Pro to find out. I connect the Hollyland transmitter to my GH6 HDMI output, which is sending out 4K 30 signal. I attach my Ninja 5 recorder to the receiver and record the received video in ProRes HQ quality. I first tested with the MAS 4K transmitter running in balance mode as well as HD and speed mode. And then I repeat the same test with the MAS 400S Pro. So here are the recorded video. If we zoom in and compare the footage side by side, we can see the MAS 4K footage definitely has more details than the MAS 400S Pro, even when both are running in the balance mode. Interestingly, output from MAS 4K's HD mode appears to be very similar to the balance mode output from the same device. I don't really see much difference at all. The speed mode does appear to lose a tiny bit of detail, but it is still better than the MAS 400S Pro's balance mode output. However, probably because the data bit rate of the MAS 4K is 12 megabit per second, which is the same as the MAS 400S Pro, but it needs to handle 4 times more pixels when transmitting 4K video. So the output from the MAS 4K has more obvious compression artifacts than the MAS 400S Pro. In some cases, especially when the image has a lot of details, the compression artifact from the MAS 4K could make the video output look almost the same as the output from the MAS 400S Pro. And in general, I noticed a lot more image compression artifacts from the MAS 4K than the 400S Pro. So what do I think about this Hollyland MAS 4K transmitter, and is it worth the extra $100 compared to the MAS 400S Pro? Well, just like most other Hollyland products, the MAS 4K is a very nice video transmitter that is very suitable for a small production set, and it offers a few nice upgrades compared to the 400S Pro. 4K transmission is definitely the most important upgrade, as most of us are shooting in 4K these days, so it's always a good thing to transmit the signal in its native resolution instead of downscaling it to 1080p. The 4K output from the Mars 4K is indeed sharper compared to the Mars 400S Pro's 1080p signal. However, I'm a little bit disappointed that the 4K video has pretty heavy image compression, which makes the overall image quality not really a significant jump as it could be. The 60 millisecond latency is really good for a transmitter in this price range, and I'm happy that my own testing can also repeat that low claimed latency as well. The extra transmission range would be good for people who works in very challenging environment and need the extra range to provide more stable transmission. The new color screen is also a nice touch, even though it is more or less just looks nicer rather than giving user any actual advantage. So overall, I think if you currently already has a transmitter like the Mars 400S Pro, I probably wouldn't upgrade to the Mars 4K, because while the Mars 4K does give us a few nice upgrades, the upgrades are also not really that dramatic in actual use, and it costs quite a bit of money to upgrade. But if you are looking at buying your first transmitter, or you have some much older video transmitter, I think that extra $100 price for the Mars 4K compared to the Mars 400S Pro is easily justifiable.